Frederick Joseph Ross was born in 1927 in St. John, New Brunswick. Fred came from a modest family of 5, including a twin sister. His parents, although from a practical working-class background, did not discourage his artistic tendencies. Fred's interest in art began early, in Holy Trinity School and St. Vincent's Boys' School, where his art began to win him prizes. After finishing at St. Vincent's, Fred enrolled at St. John Vocational School, studying design and commercial art. This became a life and career-defining decision for Fred. It was there that Fred was exposed to many of the great artists who were working and teaching in St. John at that time, including Ted Campbell. Of this, Fred is quoted as saying, "I changed over to vocational school when I was getting ready for high school, and that was the best thing I ever did. I had the luck of meeting Ted Campbell, who was a very well-known art teacher in the province and a very fine painter himself. He made me realize that it was possible to be an artist, to make a living, to support yourself and do valid and important work." Campbell recognized abilities and potential in Fred that surpassed some of his own peers. Campbell became not only Fred's mentor, but a fast friend, and he introduced Fred to other St. John artists such as Violet Gillette, Jack Humphrey, and Miller Britton, all of whom would inspire and influence Fred's work at the time and into the future. Campbell would later encourage Fred to travel and study other famous painters. Fred began to have a strong interest in figurative and mural work, and in his second year of studies at vocational school, he was selected to execute a mural at the school. He chose his friends as the subject and painted the egg tempera mural in the school stairwell entitled Annual School Picnic. It was this work that began to garner attention for Fred's work and which provided him with opportunities to visit galleries in Washington, Boston, and New York. After vocational school, Fred studied at the Pennsylvania Institute of Fine Arts, and his interest in mural work continued to grow. In 1949, Fred held his first solo show. Ted Campbell had used the works of the Mexican muralists to demonstrate the ability of art to change society, and Fred wanted to see this firsthand. Fred made his first trip to Mexico in the summer of 1949 and returned again the following summer, where he studied the murals of Mexico and studied under muralist Pablo O'Higgins. Under his supervision, Fred painted a mural in the Hotel de la Borda depicting miners working the silver mines of Taxco. In 1950, Fred met Diego Rivera, a Mexican muralist painter of great note. It was at this time that Fred made his drawings of Rivera at work. Rivera, impressed with Fred's work, encouraged him to paint murals using the rich historical background of Canada as subject matter. The Mexican mural experience and its influence and inspirations, founded on the Italian Renaissance style of single light source and illuminated figures and objects, had a significant and lasting influence on Fred's work. By 1950, Fred was teaching art at vocational school and Rothsay Collegiate School while continuing to work on his own painting. In 1950, Fred won the O'Keeffe contest for his painting The Lovers, depicting the intensity of young love. In 1952, Fred met Sheila Urquhart, a gifted young dancer from England who had come to St. John to teach ballet. She and Fred married 2 years later in 1954 in England. Sheila sat for many of Fred's paintings and was perhaps his greatest muse. His portrait of her, Sheila in Blue, was acquired by Lord Beaverbrook in 1955 for the Fredericton Collection and for a show at the Art Gallery of Toronto. Many of Sheila's students posed for Fred, and dancers have continued to inspire and be prominently featured in Fred's works. Fred and Sheila went on to have 3 children, Kathy, Lorna, and Chris, all of whom had inherited their parents' artistic abilities and gifts. All 3 were models for their father and inspired growing interest in adolescence as subject matter for his works. He commented that his children are here and I enjoy painting them. Sadly, Sheila passed away in 1998. She is greatly missed by family and the many friends who knew and loved her. Fred's work has not been without its controversies. With its subtle eroticism, Fred's work has been at times questioned by the viewing public. In 1963, Fred was invited to be included in an exhibit called Eros at the Dorothy Cameron Gallery in Toronto, the most prestigious gallery of contemporary art in the country at the time. He was asked to submit a piece depicting love. Fred's decision to accept threw him into the center of a moral storm. Fred's 1953 drawing, also entitled The Lovers, was accepted for exhibit and the show opened in May 1965. On May 21st, Dorothy Cameron was charged with 7 counts of exposing obscene pictures to public view. The show was removed from the gallery and Cameron was tried in a court of law where she was convicted on all 7 counts. Fred responded to the controversy by saying it was ridiculous and a tempest in a teapot, but nevertheless it made him feel unprotected as an artist and in how his work could be viewed by the public. From the 1950s until 1970, Fred taught at the St. John Vocational School. By the late 1960s, Fred had reached a stage in his career where he felt it was necessary to decide whether to continue to teach at vocational school or to devote himself full-time to painting. He chose painting, leaving the vocational school as the supervisor of art, and he made the courageous decision to remain in St. John and work as a professional artist, rather than move to a larger arts center such as Montreal or Toronto. Fred spent the next few years painting full-time, producing art based on his experience of living in St. John and preparing for exhibitions. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Fred painted still lifes with no figurative components. He did not abandon figurative painting altogether, however. He continued with his love of dancers and began studies of reclining models. In 1981, Christina Sabat, in an article for the Fredericton Gleaner, commented, "His adolescent models, particularly young ballet dancers, possess a gentle grace, fragility, and beauty, as well as a sense of youthful identity, dignity, and self-respect." In 1985, Fred created a large-scale figurative painting entitled A Delancey Encampment for the bicentennial of St. John. The piece shows the consistency of Fred's artist vision with its figurative composition and use of historical and contemporary artistic sources. The work gave Fred a chance to do as Rivera had urged, to paint murals based on Canadian historical subjects. The work brings together his interests in the Mexican muralist movement and work of the Italian Renaissance. This inspiration in the figurative is seen again in his 1993 work called Sleepwatcher, now owned by the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. These 2 works are examples of Fred's interest in expression through figuration, and also his love and devotion to the city in which he lives and the people who live there. His work reflects his experience of living in St. John, its history and its people. Fred has been the recipient of numerous Canada Council grants, and he was honored by the University of New Brunswick with the degree of Doctor of Laws. In 1990, he was elected to the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts. His work is presented in numerous public and private collections, including the National Gallery of Canada. In 2002, he was made a member of the Order of Canada. Tonight, Fred will receive the Order of New Brunswick. Fred Ross is an artist of the people. Today, at 82, Fred maintains a studio and continues to paint. His influence and effect on St. John are reciprocated by the city's impact on him. His style, his chosen subjects, and his artistic vision in part arise from the inspiration he has drawn from his lifelong association with St. John. You almost can't imagine one without the other.